Howdy, folks. Today's episode is all about lighting and how you can get the best out of your gear with the expert on the subject. Right after this. Welcome to Camera Shake, where we bring you the insider scoop on all things photography and videography, giving you a unique opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. As always, I'm your host, Kirsten Nuts, and before we get into it, I've got one thing to ask of you. I've noticed that over 65% of our viewers on YouTube and listeners on audio are not actually subscribed to this channel. I mean, come on, people. You can really help me out by hitting that subscribe button. It'll help me get even more amazing guests on the show. Although, as I usually say, I don't even think that's possible. But, still click that thing. So, do us a favor, hit subscribe. We love you forever. Just one click, that's all it takes. Thank you so much. Now, without further ado, though, let's give it up for today's special guest. You know him from Adorama TV, of course, as well as his own YouTube channel. The man who has single-handedly circumnavigated the globe on a motorbike armed with nothing more than a camera and a toothbrush. Give it up for Mr. Mark Wallace. Mark, great to have you back on the show. Good to see you, man.
Nice to see you. It's been too long. The last time we talked, I was in Cartagena, Colombia. Today, I'm in Medellin, Colombia. So that's sort of crazy that the two times we chat, both times I'm in Colombia, but so good to be here.
How come you're in Colombia? Do you live there permanently, or how come you're there?
No, I spend about 4 to 6 months a year here. And the bottom line is, in the United States, the prices are so extremely high that it's not affordable. I can't create YouTube content in the United States right now because I've been priced out. So the issue is, when I did my motorcycle trip, I sold all my stuff, my house, everything. When I came back, prices had skyrocketed and I was priced out of the market. And so what that means is to rent a studio that's large enough to film and do all the stuff we want to do for YouTube. In the United States, it's about $1,000 to rent a studio that's large enough. Plus I have to get all my equipment, put it all up, film everything. Models are about $300 in Phoenix if they want to be, if you want to shoot a couple of episodes of exploring photography, and then, you just add in a camera operator, etc. So to create one episode of exploring photography in the United States approaches $1,500 to $2,000. And the revenue I get from YouTube for an exploring photography video is $50, maybe $100, something like that. And so I don't know about you. I don't have, $3,000 or $4,000 every month just to shell out. So in Colombia, I'm able to create content at a much lower cost. And so it's about 10% of the cost, something like that. So it's still on my YouTube channel right now. Without sponsors, I'd be losing thousands of dollars a month. And so that's just the economics of it. So I appreciate people like, Evoto and Luminar Neo and Seiconic and etc. Those guys. So when you see an episode that's brought to you by a brand, that's the only way that episode is coming to you, is because a company is helping us create those videos.
That's actually a really interesting subject, just within itself, because people don't really realize the economics, as you say, of what it takes to create content like this, like a podcast or, YouTube videos, for example. There's quite a lot of cost involved in that.
There is a lot of cost, and it's, I try to be gentle with my audience. Sometimes I get a little frustrated because they'll demand things sort of in a very assertive way. How come you're not doing this? Why didn't you use this thing? And the answer is, I don't have that thing. I'll get a lot of people will say, can you please do a video comparing the latest Nikon to the latest Sony to the latest Canon and tell us what you think about, this latest gadget? I'm like, I wish I could. When I was doing Adorama TV, fortunately, Adorama has everything. And so I could request those things to be sent to me. But now I'm on my own, back to the same way I started. And so the only way to do those kinds of videos is I have to actually buy those cameras or find some company that's going to loan them to me. And that's a difficult thing nowadays. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, it was much, much easier to work with brands than it is now. Because, when I started, I think my first YouTube video was 2006. 2006. And on YouTube, it was Zach Arias. It was me. It was, I think, Chase Jarvis. I think Fro was on. He was just starting out. That was about it. I mean, there were just a few people. And so, the brands were working with maybe 10 people. Now there's, I don't know how many thousands of people on YouTube creating content and doing a really, really, really good job of it, by the way. It's the competition is much more fierce, I guess you would say. That's a good thing, I think. Some ways it's not so much of a good thing, but that's where we are. And instead of trying to, rawr, back in my day, you embrace it. I love to see the new editing styles, the new filming styles, the stuff that we would have never thought of that newer, younger creators are doing now.
Yeah, I mean, that's really a thing. I mean, especially when it comes to editing, I remember when I first got into watching YouTube videos, to learn more about, let's say, Photoshop, for example. It was a lot more manual in many ways back then. You had to learn procedures and techniques and stuff. And I watched your latest Evoto video, and it's interesting actually that you made that, because Evoto approached me too about making a video of them. And so it was actually interesting watching your video. And I'm really like, a lot of the stuff, like with the skin retouching, for example, frequency separation, that was a technique you had to learn. Like, you had to actually get good at that.
Oh, yeah.
Now it's like, you move a slider. Ta-da!
It's so crazy. I mean, like the frequency separation stuff, it took me a while to learn how to do that and do it properly. And then I scripted out, I think I used a teleprompter, because you have to follow these steps very precisely. And I created a video how to do frequency separation. And it was so complicated that when I would go to do frequency separation, I would watch my own video to remember how to do it, because, you had to make sure you did it all in the right order. I wasn't doing it every day. So, with Evoto, with Luminar Neo, in fact, Luminar is coming out with a brand new face retouching software. So Luminar is more for scenic photos, architectural photos, general photography, and it does a really good job with that. It doesn't really do a good job with skin retouching and the stuff that Evoto just knocks out of the park. So it's sort of been this really easy decision. If you were a scenic or landscape photographer and you wanted AI to help you out, you'd go get Luminar Neo. And if you wanted to have a workflow that was incredibly fast and knock out skin retouching and all of that stuff, you'd just use Evoto. But now I think it's Affinity is the name of the software I don't know if they've announced it or not. I just got an email from them, but it's going to be interesting to see how things evolve. And I've been talking a lot with the guys at Evoto. They're in Singapore, about their roadmap, about their integrations with Lightroom and Photoshop and plugins and catalog stuff. And, they're trying to do a lot of things to make that workflow a lot easier and better. And I'm also talking with the guys over in France with DxO. So I did I think I did 12 or 14 classes with f-stoppers for DxO Photo Lab and Pure Raw and the Nik collection, and like every single application that DxO creates, I've created a class. It's over on f-stoppers. So it's really fun now to be able to talk to those guys. And I used to be a software developer. I worked at Intel for 10 years. And so I was a senior programmer analyst, and then I managed a bunch of developers. And so I sort of know that world and how it works. It's really sort of exciting to see all that stuff.
Yeah, and especially, with AI coming into the frame as well at the same time, it's, the ease of use, or whatever the technical term is, ease of usability, whatever, it's so different now. And of course, it then from an educator's point of view, I sometimes think like, well, I mean, if you were to do something like Flern, for example, today,
right?
Like, you have in many ways, you have a lot less to teach, in a sense. Would you agree with that, or?
Well, I don't think so, because there are always those very specialized things that you need to do. I mean, look at Pix Imperfect. He's a genius. I mean, that channel, and he does things that are so incredible in 30 seconds. They're mind blowing. And he's got the best hair on the planet. But those kind of channels are always going to be there, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Umar, I can't pronounce his surname. Anyway, Umar from Pixel Perfect. He was on the show a few weeks ago. If you listen to this, or if you're watching this, make sure you check out that episode. That was super fun having you on the show, and you're absolutely right, an absolute genius. It's
genius.
Also really, it's really interesting also to watch his channel. I've been following his channel for years, and really the way that channel has developed, is the production quality on that today is so different from what it was.
Right.
Ago. And yet his hair has stayed perfect for the whole time.
My hair has not changed either. This has only gone gray. That's it. Well, the interesting thing is the new content that's coming out. I have seen a difference between sort of the style overpowering the teaching. I do see that a lot. That's frustrating. You get these videos that look fantastic. They're edited. They've got fantastic music, but there's just nothing to them. So I think that's one of the negative sides to having a lot of influencers and creators and stuff that back in my day, there were a lot of people that learned how to teach. And that's where they started from. Teachers that actually knew how to lay out a plan of the principle and the application and, the handles where you could grab on and apply that stuff. So that I'm seeing is one of those gaps. So there are a few people that do it really, really well. They have the style, the editing, the presentation, like Pix Imperfect. That's a fantastic example because he doesn't only have great content, but his content looks fantastic. It's well presented. And I won't name names, but there are others that it's just a clickbait thumbnail. You hop in there, they've got the latest gadget and they say it's fantastic and they're off and running, to the next video. And it's just all about, how many eyeballs they can get, that sort of is the fault of the algorithm and what's happened to YouTube. So I don't really fault them because if you're going to earn any money on YouTube, you have to have a lot of watch hours. You got to not only have a lot of views, those views have to stick around and watch the videos. And so the only way to do that is to sort of do the cliffhanger video where it's like, in this episode, I'm going to show you the one thing that you're doing with your camera that could destroy your career. But first, that kind of stuff, because you have to get people to keep watching. So I blame that on YouTube, not so much the content creators.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the problem with, with a platform that really balloons out of all proportion, over time.
Right.
Because everybody's competing for the same watch time, ultimately, and this is one of those things. For this channel, for instance, watch time is also very important, but the vast majority of people who consume this podcast are quite evidently consuming it on audio. So, getting those people to come over to YouTube and actually to create that. So, for instance, that minimum of watch time hours that you need to even, be monetized, for example. On YouTube, that it took absolutely flipping forever with this.
My Shifty Drifty channel is not monetized because the only way you can get to monetization, first you got to get 1,000 subscribers to get at the base level. Then I think you're a partner, but you can't monetize. And you have to, it's 1,000 watch hours within 365 days.
It's
10,000.
4,000.
Is it 4,000?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And it rolls off. So if you've got a great video that you made in January and you're at 3,500 in December and you only get a couple hundred videos, then in January that video rolls. You got to so it forces you to just keep creating content. So I sort of like that because it does set a bar that says, if you're going to monetize, you have to be serious about it. You've got to, you got to create. You have to be a creator.
Yeah, exactly.
And a lot of people
so from an economical point of view, it's like even the word monetizing is a big word, Because I mean, you're not really going to, it's not a substitute for a full-time job in terms of income. Even once you reach that hurdle and you make a few bucks, here or there, it's nothing.
Right.
It pays for absolutely nothing. So that's where the sort of, the listener or the subscriber support becomes really important. I want to talk a little bit about Adorama TV, because obviously I know you originally, this goes back
from Adorama TV.
Literally years. I discovered you through Adorama TV, and I said in the last episode, and it's absolutely true. Literally, your video on how to use speedlights has taught me everything I know about speedlights.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, it's one of those videos where there's so much golden information in there, and it was so thorough that I've referenced that video many, many times over the years, because
which one is it? I think I've made 50 speedlight videos. I don't know which one you're talking about.
I think it was like a course or something. It was definitely several episodes. It covered everything from, how to shoot groups with speedlights and,
Was it my Creative Live Speedlights 101 class?
Yes, you're correct. It was Creative Live.
Okay.
Not Adorama TV.
With the ninjas.
With the ninjas, yes, exactly right.
Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. That class, you want to hear some crazy background about that class? I was not scheduled to teach that class. And Chase called me and said, hey, guess what? Next week, the presenter we had lined up had canceled, or maybe it was 2 weeks out. Can you come in and teach? Because at that time, Creative Live was live every weekend. And so I'm like, sure, I've got this class that I teach, this Speedlights 101. And they said, come up and teach it. And so I had about 4 days to prepare that. It was a class I taught a few times, but because it was sort of last minute, there was no expectation for it to be this big, spectacular class. And it was sort of low-key fun. And I think that translated to the content being probably better than it would have been if there was a bunch of pressure for it to be knock it out of the park home run. And it turned out to be one of my favorite classes I've ever taught because it was so fun. Like the ninjas, we have these ninjas flipping around. If you haven't seen the class, at the end of the class, that was not planned. That I was trying to figure out how to teach the pre-flash. And I thought, I was a big fan of this old YouTube thing called I Am Ninja. I don't know if you remember this old ninja show from the 2000s. But I was like, oh yeah, a ninja is sort of like the pre-flash. And so I was talking about this ninja, and I think it was Kenna Osterman said, hey, I know some guys that are like street performers that are ninjas. You want to have them come in and flip around? I'm like, yeah. And so like all that just sort of came together very, very last minute, and it turned out to be fantastic.
Hey, let me just jump in real quick to tell you about the amazing sponsor of this episode, Platypod. Platypod offers innovative camera support systems designed to unleash your creativity. With their stable, versatile, and portable solutions, you can capture stunning shots like never before. And I'm not just saying that. As the host of the Camera Shake podcast, I can personally vouch for Platypod's incredible products. They've become an integral part of the show. In fact, I'm surrounded by various Platypod products holding up lights, cameras, microphones, and so on. It's really helped to transform the way I make the show and the way I shoot at home, in the studio, and on location. But don't just take my word for it. Explore Platypod's website at www.platypod.com to discover their range of products, including the Platypod Extreme, Platypod tripod heads, and the brand new handle, of course. Make sure to follow Platypod on Instagram and Facebook at Platypod Tripods for exclusive updates, tips, and giveaways. By choosing Platypod, you're not only investing in your photography, but you're also supporting the Camera Shake Photography Podcast. Thanks again to Platypod, our amazing sponsor. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps. I always thought that was one of the advantages when it came to platforms like Creative Live, let's say in comparison to YouTube, for example, was that there was a structured approach to it. I spent 25 years in education, teaching music in schools, and I used to run a private music school for 12 years out of that as well. So so education is very much part of my background, and so I know how important the structured approach is, a progressive, structured approach in terms of lesson planning and all the rest of it. And that's, of course, one of the big issues for me on YouTube, where you're sort of, I don't know, you're diving into this ocean of seemingly unrelated video.
Absolutely.
Teaching.
And to go back to what you asked earlier about Adorama TV. So before Adorama TV, there was digital photography one-on-one on my still available YouTube channel. And so that began because I was teaching an 8-week photography course, and it was really popular in Phoenix. And so I was doing it. So it was 8 weeks every Tuesday night, and it was sold out for years. And so I started teaching it every Tuesday and Thursday night, and then those sold out. And so then I did an advanced class on the weekends for people that couldn't commit to 8 weeks, and those sold out. And then it was a studio lighting class, then an advanced studio lighting class. So I had all these classes that I was teaching, and I was teaching the same thing over and over and over. So I did that from, I started those in 2003, and then they just took off. So around 2006, I thought, the studio lighting class specifically is the same stuff over and over. I should make DVDs. And then for people that can't fly in and come to Phoenix and do this in person, we'll just record it. And I had a background in video. I used to do live shows, and I was a producer for about 13 years, and I toured and all that kind of stuff. So I thought, okay, this can't be too hard. I had a nice, one of those old Sony, or a Canon XL1, I think. That was, the big rage. It had detachable lenses and stuff. So this is early 2000s. And I brought in a model, and we recorded a few videos. They were horrible. They were so bad. And then I was listening to NPR, and they were talking about this new thing called YouTube. And I thought, I could take those horrible videos. They're not good enough to sell, but I could put them on YouTube to then embed them on my blog so people could see those and sort of understand what they're going to get if they sign up for the class. That's how my YouTube channel started. And then more people started watching the YouTube channel than it did than the classes, really. And so then what I decided to do was to create digital photography one-on-one. And when I did that, the methodology was very planned out. It was, I'm going to teach a principle, then an application, then a principle. And the thought was people will watch this in sequence. So anybody that's new to photography, they're going to come in, they're going to learn about the exposure triangle, then they're going to learn about aperture values and depth of field, and then they're going to learn about freezing, with the shutter speed, and then, this whole progression. And so each episode was predicated with something before that. And so I think that's where I began to get a lot of my audience, because people were following along with this class. And so then what happened was the MAC Group, which is the U.S. marketing channel and distribution channel of Profoto and Seikonic and Mamiya and Pocket Wizard and about Benro and Tenba and I don't know how many brands. They were trying to break into social media. It was a new thing. And so all of their brand managers were looking for people that were using their brands, and all of them found me because unbeknownst to me, I was using all MAC Group products. So they just have good stuff. And so then they called and asked me to do videos. And so I started doing videos for Profoto and Pocket Wizard. Then I did a tour with Pocket Wizard, and then Adorama. So Abraham Steinberg was the guy at Adorama. He was a marketing guy. He wanted to get into social media. He saw this stuff. And so he called me and said, hey, we will sponsor digital photography one-on-one. And so it used to be digital photography one-on-one brought to you by Snap Factory, which is my company, and Light Source, which was a photography podcast that doesn't exist anymore. And they said, we will take the place of Light Source, and it'll be brought to you by Snap Factory and Adorama. And we said, fantastic. And so they said, let's do it for 2 years. We signed a contract, and they wanted a video every single day. So it was this insane schedule. And so it was a product review, an interview, a teaching, a behind the scenes. And then we never did this, but the original plan was to have little Mark Wallace's pop up on the Adorama website when you clicked on a product, and it would be like, and I'd pop up and be like, "You're looking at a Canon STE3. This is the new whatever," and I would give some little help, like the little Clippy from Microsoft Word back in the day. So technically, that was just too much work, and so we flipped that, and it became iPad reviews. And so early in the day, but things changed. And so after I'd hired a staff, we built out the studios and the sets and all of that kind of stuff. Adorama hired a new marketing manager. He came in and he said, "This is crazy that we're going to invest this amount of money, and it's all going to be on Mark's YouTube channel. We should create our own YouTube channel. We should create an Adorama YouTube channel." And I said, "Well, we've already signed an agreement." And so there was this back and forth for a couple of months. And then we decided we would create Adorama TV. And if you look at Adorama TV for the first 2 years, it's digital photography one-on-one, and it's on my YouTube channel, and it's on Adorama's brand new YouTube channel. Because in the early days, my YouTube channel was much, much larger than Adorama TV. And so for 2 years, it was these two things. And after the 2 years was finished, Adorama said, "Hey, we still want you to do this. However, it's only going to be Adorama TV. We don't want you to be putting stuff on your own YouTube channel," which is understandable. They were paying the bills. And so we thought,
a similar thing.
Yeah. And then Gavin knows the whole history. He was there with me through most of that stuff. And so the original Adorama TV, I thought I would be doing that for about 2 years. And then they asked me to stay on and be the host. And then we brought in Gavin, and we brought in Joe McNally, we brought in Vanessa Joy, we brought in Tamara Lackey, we brought in, bunches of people. And then, we just kept doing it. And so in 2022, Adorama said, "Hey, we've done 12 years. And because of budgets and stuff, we can't really do what we've done in the past." And so that's where we ended. So I actually did 10 years of Adorama TV that I never planned to do. So the whole thing was a blessing to me. Yeah.
And then, of course, you went, in between, you sort of went on your motorbike and like I said earlier, circumnavigated the world as well on top of that.
Right. Well, my people ask me about photography and, do you love photography? Is it your passion? And my answer is no, photography really is not my passion. Photography for me is just a means to tell a story about the people and the experiences that I have. And it always has been. And, the teaching part of that and the YouTube thing was not really, I never sat down and said, this is what my goal in life is going to be, is to become this YouTube guy. I always thought of myself as a storyteller and a person that would look at different belief systems and different viewpoints and try to tell those stories through audio and through video. So I've created a bunch of audio stories sort of in the spirit of This American Life, or Jonathan Goldstein, or if you're a podcasting nerd, those guys. But I couldn't monetize that. And so I still do that occasionally as a passion project. But photography for me is just to show people something that they would never see themselves. And so that sort of comes from the James Noctway credo. So James Noctway is a war photographer. He's been out and about for, 20 years or something. And I've studied his work intensely. And so his viewpoint is, as photographers, we need to bear witness to the things that are happening in the world so others can see them and take action and do things about them. And so that's sort of where I saw myself. And so when I finally had the opportunity, I realized, hey, I could shoot my exploring photography videos anywhere, and Creative Live was doing well. So the classes that I was recording. So I thought, okay, I could just sell everything and do what I've always really wanted to do, which was explore the world, meet people, learn about myself, learn about different cultures and beliefs. And I'm a geography nut and a history nut. And so I was able to sort of blend my passions. And so that was really good. Now, not so much, because everything after the pandemic, the monetization and the way that the world was sort of structured as far as earning doesn't exist anymore. And so I have to be a little bit more judicious on where I am and how I spend my money and those types of things.
So I remember you coming back from your motorcycle event, and I think that was approximately when we spoke last. I think you were in Colombia, and I think you were just about to
actually
go back to the US.
I have something I can show you. Let me see if I can cue this up. So if it doesn't work, sorry, but let me just show you. This is what happened right before we talked last time. So I'm going to see if I can play this for you and make it work. So hopefully this works out. Let's see. Here we go. The journey from the United States down to Ushuaia, getting stuck in Buenos Aires and flying back to Cartagena, and then that's where we talked. And then right after that, there is I can see if I can show you this. Where is it? Yeah. So I'm just going to share my screen, and I will make sure that you can see me here. So I'm up here. But this crazy ride through Colombia is what happened immediately after we talked. And it's in this playlist on Shifty Drifty. And one of the things that was really crazy, this should not have any audio. I'll make sure it doesn't have any audio. So this was Eileen and myself. This is where we went through, and we got stuck in these crazy protests. So they were protesting the actions that the government was taking with COVID and this inequality of income and all kinds of stuff. And so if you really want to know a fantastic story about Colombia and South America and sort of the things that have happened down there, watch that whole Colombian playlist. It's really, it started out as Eileen and myself. So Eileen is my friend from Patagonia. We did a ride through Patagonia. That's also on, there's a ride through Mongolia or a Patagonia video that you should check out. But watch that first and then watch the Colombia stuff. And it is exactly the kind of stuff that I always wanted to do as a photographer, which was go into these places and share with people the culture, the food, the scenery, everything about that place. And so I think probably the Patagonia video that I created with Eileen, and then the ride through Colombia, which we did over 3 months, and understanding why people were protesting and what was going on in the country and the inequality of income and all that kind of stuff. We were able to share all of that through video and stills. And I think that's probably the thing that has most closely aligned with my vision of who I want to be as a photographer. And so it's been, I love being in the studio and shooting models and doing all the light sculpting and all that kind of stuff. But if I had unlimited funds, I would be doing what I just showed you full time. That's for sure what I would be doing.
Yeah, I had a similar sort of sense of that, or I got a sense of that when I spent some time in the Lofoten Islands last October with my friend Dave Williams. And we were shooting, well, actually we were teaching a workshop up there, but predominantly we're doing two things. We were shooting Northern Lights, of which Dave is the expert. But then also we had some Viking models that we took with us 24/7. So we could also shoot, we could shoot them on location across the islands. It was just unbelievable. The typical Viking landscape, and you have, a model that looks like he's straight out of Netflix, basically.
Yeah.
It was just unbelievable. I mean, it was so much fun, but it's also, for me, it was fun. It was really fun having a model and being able to do and to teach on location lighting and all the rest of it. But what was really fascinating was exactly that, exploring, a different culture, realizing, what life is like when you live like beyond the Arctic Circle, in a small, tiny little place that's mainly uninhabited, and mainly uninhabitable, And it was just amazing to see how people survived, and actually survive, but even by Western standards, with a really high degree of luxury, actually, in a place like that. It was really fascinating to get to know people, to to talk to them, and to kind of to hear their attitudes towards things. And I remember talking to a guy who's been up there for decades or something, and he was originally from Iceland, and he said like, when I was a young man, I used to come home from the pub, from the bar, and I used to look up at the sky and I used to say, oh God, these damn northern lights again. I used to go inside. And it was like blowing my mind, because I'm thinking like, man, I've never seen it before. This is the first time I saw it. They have, just looking up the sky and seeing the northern lights, it's completely blown my mind.
Yeah.
And just to meet somebody who is so like laissez-faire about that,
right? Because
it's just a daily occurrence to them. It's just unbelievable. So it's super.
I think the thing I love about traveling, and not traveling as a tourist, not going into the touristy parts of town and doing the touristy things. I do that stuff, but for me, I love going to a local place where I don't speak the language and staying with a local family and getting more of an authentic experience. And what I've discovered is that the interconnections between countries and cultures are a lot tighter than I realized at first, especially coming from the United States, maybe a conservative background, really fundamentalist conservative background. My growing up, it was like, I'm from America and this is us, and then there's everybody else. And I really had no idea how cultures influenced the things I did and said, the languages I speak, the food I ate, the beliefs that I had, and how it affects things with everyday life. And also things, especially in U.S. politics right now, things are so divisive, very, very divided. It's easy to get in your trench and be like, this is the way it is and you're wrong, from either side. And so when you start bridging those, crossing those barriers, speaking to people that maybe you don't agree with, you don't understand them, you find a lot of commonalities. And then you start discovering why they do the things they do, or why they believe the things they believe. And then all of a sudden it's, at first frustrating, because that black and white world falls apart and things become much more gray, and you start to see things from different angles. There's an old Calvin and Hobbes cartoon that I absolutely love, and it's Calvin talking to his mom about something that's just black and white. And then she says something, I don't remember what it is, and all of a sudden Calvin has this realization that it's not a black and white thing. And then Bill Watterson, who created Calvin and Hobbes, the rest of the comic strip is in the style of Picasso, because little Calvin can't figure out, he's like, oh no, I see all the angles for every argument, and now the world doesn't make sense. Oh no, I'll have to see if I can find it and send it to you. But that is that's sort of what happens to you when you experience a journey like that. Is things tend not to be just this is right and this is wrong. There are different points to that.
Absolutely. I've experienced that very much actually myself, because I'm technically an immigrant here in the UK. My
Right.
family are based in Germany, which is where I grew up, and partially in Canada too. So of course, when you grow up in a certain place, and Europe as a whole is a lot smaller, or the countries within Europe are a lot smaller, but they're very, very distinct cultural differences between, let's say, Germany and France and Italy and Spain,
Sure.
the United Kingdom and so on. And so, of course, you grow up, thinking of France or of other countries in Europe in a certain way. You sort of get used to stereotypes. I don't know. It always rains in England. Not untrue. Not in the middle of a heat. Yeah, we're in the middle of a heat wave right now. So I was talking to another friend of mine the other day. He's from Wales, and he said Wales is effectively the umbrella of England. So if you think it always rains in England, that's not entirely true, but it does definitely always rain in Wales. So but
it rains a lot.
it's not. Oh, it rains a lot, I know. But here's the thing. So you have these stereotypes, right? And the interesting thing was when I moved to London, and I've lived here now for almost 30 years, right?
Wow.
28 years ago. I moved over in 96. You do the math. If you're listening, you do the math. You tell me how many years it is. But the interesting thing about this is, yes, there are differences, 100%, right? In lots of different ways. But ultimately, I would say that 95+% is exactly the same.
Oh, yeah.
The commonalities vastly outnumber the differences. And I find it bizarre now that whether that's in the way that we look at people from other countries, the way that we look at other cultures, or just in the way that we look at people who have a different opinion, for example, in a political landscape. I find it really bizarre that we focus on that tiny little bit of things that are different, rather than focusing on the vast majority of stuff that we have in common. It's just,
Yeah.
I just find it mind-boggling.
It is interesting that, one of the things that I found very interesting in Latin American culture as opposed to the culture in the United States is, in the United States, we value power, money, and influence. Those are the three things that a person in the United States, if you say this is a successful person, they're really talking about, are you powerful, are you influential, or are you wealthy? Those three things. And you know that because when you meet somebody for the first time in the United States, generally you say, hey, this is my name. What do you do for a living? And you're really asking, are you a doctor, a lawyer? Do you make a lot of money? Are you a politician? Do you have a lot of influence? Or are you a YouTuber influencer? Are you famous? Are you one of those three things? Really, that's what you're asking. Yeah. And in Latin American culture, the question is different. It's how's your name? How many people are in your family? Do you have children? That's almost always the first question. And the value of success in a lot of Latin American cultures is, how are you connected to the community and in a family? And so, and also wealth and influence and all that stuff still plays a large part. But it's interesting to me that the very first thing, generally speaking, in South America is, how are you doing with your family? And in the United States is, how are you doing with your bills? I mean, it's very interesting. Yeah.
The way that goes in the UK is, when somebody says how are you? The answer is usually not too bad. Rather than saying,
that's
I'm
right.
Great, I'm not too bad. I'm bad, but not too bad.
Yeah. In Australia, it's how you going. That took me forever to figure out, what, I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. How you going?
Yeah.
How am I going? I have a motorcycle. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, actually, talk about motorcycles. You then switched that out to a Land Rover.
I did. So I bought a very inexpensive Land Rover. So the LR4 is what I have in 2011. And, people look at that and they're like, oh my gosh, how much money do you make? Because you have this really crazy expensive car. I paid for that car all in with taxes, title, tags, the works. It was $10,000. So, wow. It's not a really expensive car. And then it was really that was a project because my brother is a car person. He restored a Datsun, a 1966 Roadster, down to the bones and back. And, and I thought this would be a great project. I'm getting a little older. So the motorcycle, there's a lot of places that I really wanted to go with a 4-wheel drive so I could have a rooftop tent. I have solar panel. I could take a little bit more gear, make videos a little bit differently. On the motorcycle, you're so confined to what you can take. And I thought it'd be a fun project to go take that Land Rover to my brother's house. He lives in Kansas, and to tear it apart and rebuild it and get it all ready. And the plan was to come back to South America and then spend a few years living out of that rooftop tent and creating content. Unfortunately, the problems with that $10,000 Land Rover were a lot more than I thought. And so I just can't afford to fix the Land Rover. So it probably needs another $15,000 or $20,000 of work on it before it's ready to actually come south and do the kind of trips that I wanted to do. So I wanted to go into the Amazon, throw it on a barge, go down the Amazon River into the jungle, do some crazy stuff like that. Unfortunately, the funding just dried up. So if you've watched the Shifty Drifty channel, you've seen me go down to Mexico a few times, up into Canada, do some fun stuff, and then it sort of ends. And the reason it ends is I don't have enough money to keep going with that vehicle. And because it's got the rooftop tent and all the gear and stuff on it, and it's lifted and, it's got the big off-road tires and everything, it gets about 15 or 16 miles to the gallon. Wow. And so the cost of putting, it's over $100 every time I fill the tank. So, my motorcycle would get about 50 miles to the gallon as opposed to 15. And so, yeah, just the economics of the Land Rover didn't work out. So I have been trying to shop around to Netflix and Amazon Prime and some other places to see if I can pitch them an adventure series that they would then fund. And then maybe we'd get a Grenadier or some other kind of vehicle and do an adventure. But so far that has not happened. And so, yeah. So in the meantime, I've rebooted my Mark Wallace Videos YouTube channel. So the channel that became Adorama TV is still there. And now I've been doing exploring photography videos. And it's been really fun. It's been a challenge because the resources I used to have aren't there. And so I'm depending on viewer support and partnerships. And for the most part, people watching the videos are incredibly supportive. But as you mentioned, it's mind-boggling to me that I'll look on my YouTube analytics page and all that stuff, and I'll look at the comments, and the vast majority of people asking for new content, suggesting things, haven't even subscribed to the channel. And so, I'm like, so you want me to invest my life and my talent and my experience to create content for you for free, and in exchange, you have not even clicked a button. That sometimes can be frustrating.
Yeah.
So for you people out there who are watching Camera Shake and have for a while, and you haven't even clicked the subscribe button, go ahead, click it. It's seems like a small thing, but it's not. It's the lifeblood of content like this.
Absolutely. I mean, for any creator, that is really it makes a huge difference, to have people, subscribe to your channel, because it sort of shows some appreciation and maybe a little bit of commitment that really makes a lot of difference for that creator in a number of different ways. And by the way, all of Mark's various YouTube channels and everything are down in the description. So if you're watching this on YouTube, then just head down to the YouTube description. You'll see all the links down there. And of course, if you listen to the audio version of this podcast, you'll find that likewise in the description. So, just a flavor, check out those channels. Hit subscribe.
Check them out.
Show some love.
Hit subscribe. Turn on the bell. Also commenting, asking questions, that is huge. That is fantastic. Sharing videos, all of that stuff helps more people become exposed to the content. And the other thing I love that really went away when I was doing Adorama TV that was present in the early days of YouTube, and it's sort of come back with my channel. So my channel is about 200,000 subscribers, a little bit more. So it's not tiny, but it's not big. And I sort of like the smaller audience for one reason, and that is there's this sense of community. And so if somebody asks a question, will Luminar or will Evoto work with a Fuji X1, whatever, somebody else will answer that question for me. And so there's this sense of community where people are interacting and asking and answering questions, sort of like on Reddit or something in the comments. And with Adorama TV, that sort of went away because it didn't feel like it was me and this crew of people, this community. It was a company throwing out content like a TV station or something. So I really love the community aspect of having a smaller channel and growing an audience through the years. And the other thing I really love to do when possible is when I'm in a city, inviting people to come hang out. The one thing that is sort of a bummer, Facebook. So I have about 70,000 people on Facebook. And I used to be able to post something on Facebook and all 70,000 people would get that post. Now, if I post something on Facebook, nobody gets the post unless I boost it. Yeah. It's very annoying. And so I can post something on Instagram and post the same thing on Facebook. So I've got 70,000 people on Facebook. I've got about 20,000 on Instagram. And on Instagram, thousands of people will see it. And I'll look on the numbers on Facebook and it's like 5 people. I'm like, how is this possible that I have 70,000 followers and only 5 people have seen this? And I just get these pop-ups because I have a business account saying, you got to boost it. You got to boost it. So how's that possible? Back in the day,
it's the same company. It makes no sense.
I know. It's so frustrating because that loss of community drives me nuts. I used to be able to say, hey, I'm in Denver. Who wants to come out? And 300 people in Denver would be like, oh, hey, fantastic. Let's go do it. And everybody go to a coffee shop and 20 people would show up or so. And then same thing in any city. I would just be able to say, hey, here I am. Come hang out. Or let's do a photo walk. And it was very spontaneous. And now the only way to make that happen is to do a video on YouTube and promote it and do a premiere and post on Instagram and do reels and then pay a bunch of money. And then you might have 5 people that actually see it in time to show up, which is frustrating because I know a lot of people want to do a photo walk. They want to come to a free class. They want to do stuff, but they're not seeing that. And so that's why you turn on the bell, because then you get notifications and you can see all that stuff. So sort of from this side, we have now become powerless to communicate with our own audience unless we pay to promote that stuff. And so the only way to make sure that you actually get the content that your favorite creators are creating on YouTube is to turn on the bell and turn on notifications. That's why every single channel out there is saying, please turn on the bell and turn on notifications, because that's how they get to you. I'm sounding like a grumpy old man.
No, but it's absolutely true. And a lot of the time, when people are just sort of casually listening to to this content or casually watching YouTube videos, of course, all of that behind the scenes, the engine that drives all that kind of stuff, all the details behind that are sort of hidden from the regular viewer, and
right.
It might just be sort of an annoying thing. You watch a YouTube video and somebody again says, like and subscribe, and you go, oh, God, that's really annoying. But actually, it's much more important than you think at that point. The thing
it is. Well, it's also interesting to me. So I just did an Evoto master class last Saturday. So about 3 days ago, we were in the studio. We did a deep dive into Evoto and some lighting setups and stuff. And it was promoted by Evoto. So it was in partnership with them. And so a week before I did the Evoto master class, we needed to make sure that the bandwidth was working. The studio was set up. I had a brand new crew here in Colombia. And so I just posted on YouTube. I'm like, hey, we're just going to do a laid back, fun lighting class. Join us if you can. We're really checking audio and lighting and camera angles and all that kind of stuff, but we're going to create content. And so a bunch of people showed up, and a lot of people were asking questions. And so it was just this really fun thing. And then we did the Evoto class, and it was very structured, and people were asking questions. And when I looked at the analytics, one thing that blew my mind was in the unstructured, impromptu, hey, come hang out class, the number of interactions was double what it was in the structured, sponsored by class. And I'm not sure if it was because the unstructured one was so unstructured, people were just throwing out questions so I would do something. And the structured one was so formal, it followed a direct path that there weren't as many questions because we anticipated those and were answering them along the way. But I'm curious to see. I'm planning to do a bunch of new live streams. In fact, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm calling this my content creation cave. I've rented this apartment specifically to create content almost every day. I'm going to try to live stream every day here and see what happens. So that's the next thing that I haven't announced on my own channel. You got it first, Kirsten.
Hey, there you go. It's always, if you want news, any news in the world of photography, Camera Shake Podcast clearly is where it's at.
There's a camera, by the way, that I keep saying that I absolutely want, that you should have, because it is the personification of your podcast. I think it's called it's not Pinterest camera, but it's a similar name. But it's a pinhole camera that's like the size of a brownie, Kodak brownie, and you load in film, actual film, and then you do the pinhole, take a photo of whatever, it says, 2 or 3 minute exposure or whatever it is. Yeah. And then on the camera, you have these syringes basically, and you inject the developer, and then you shake the camera, and then you inject the fixer, and you shake the camera, and then you rinse it all out, and then you open the back, and out comes a print. And I'm like, this is perfect because it's actually a camera shake for this to work.
Amazing. I need to
it's called, I can't remember the name of the camera, but it's like Pinterest, but it's Instagram. Maybe it's Pinstagram, like okay. Pinterest and Instagram and Pinhole all mixed up. But I've seen them on Instagram, and I really, really, really want them because you can shoot and develop all inside this camera.
Well, that would be absolutely amazing, especially because I've just sort of discovered my newfound love for film photography. So it would be perfect. Oh, actually,
you got to get, and I don't think they're that much. The cost is in the developer fixer, the chemicals in the film. I think the camera is like a Lomo kind of price structure. So I could be wrong, but I think they're like around $100.
Amazing. I mean, I recently got hold of a Mamiya C330, dual lens reflex camera, which I got hold of for a very.
Here's a tip for you, for all you filmy camera people out there. So you used to be able to go to Bangkok, and in Bangkok there are these huge, massive markets that are like city blocks. And in there are all these old vintage camera stores. And for years, they really didn't know what they had. They just had all these old vintage cameras that were left over, that came over from the Vietnam War and all the 70s and 80s, or I guess the 60s and 70s. And so they had lots of Leica stuff, lots of Leica cameras and lenses and viewfinders and attachments and old Nikon bodies that were used during that era, and lenses, and just, thousands of them. And you can pick up these really rare cameras if you really searched for not a lot of money. They've sort of wised up now and they're not as inexpensive. But I've found out in Buenos Aires, same thing is true. And then here in Medellin, there's a camera store that has probably 50 old Leicas and Rolleiflex, and I think it's in, Prague? I believe it was in Prague. There are camera stores that have a bunch of old Soviet era Leica knockoff cameras. And I forgot what they're called, Lutz or something, but they're these crazy cameras. So if you want to go travel and have fun and also feed your film camera, addiction, those are some cities that are definitely worth visiting for that very reason.
Oh, definitely. It just absolutely pay off to sort of shop around. It took me a little while to find that particular camera. I was looking for this particular model, and it took a little while to get hold of one, but I did find one in Yorkshire, I think. So north of England, or northern England. And it turned out to be, it's in perfect, pristine condition. No light leaks. It works perfectly fine. So,
Yeah. And light leaks are fun. I mean, let me go off on a tangent. So there's two tangents I would love to talk to you about that have to do with modern day photography. One is AI is evil. So we could talk about that a little bit. And the second one is this pixel peeping quest for perfection in new cameras. So a lot of the software that you have, it doesn't matter if it's DxO or if it's Lightroom or if it's Photoshop, you've got all these chromatic aberration corrections, lens corrections, all that kind of stuff. One of the things that makes a camera distinctive is the problems that camera has. How the lens is distorting things. If you look at what's the film? Simple Things. I can't remember the name of it. Just won an Academy Award with not Emma Thompson. She was like naked in the whole thing, and everybody was very up in arms about it.
Yes, I think I know exactly what you talking.
Watch the cinematography of that film, and you see these pincushion cameras or fisheye camera or lenses, and you see this weird bokeh in the background that's all weird and nasty, and a lot of this stuff. They used crazy lenses to tell this story in a way that's beautiful. But if you look at that film and the cinematography, technically, it's all wrong. It's got distortion and it's got all kinds of problems. And, so technically speaking, it's wrong. It is a beautiful, beautiful film. And that's what I think why a lot of people like older cameras, because it brings in light leaks, it brings in lens distortion, it brings in artifacts, it brings in all this kind of stuff. And now we're even using stuff like the Nick Collection Analog Effects and Luminar Neo to apply defects on top, grain and light leaks and all kinds of stuff when we used to just get them. So I think that the quest for having these pure, perfect, high resolution, absolutely impeccable images is misleading people from the true joy of photography, which is to tell a story in a unique way from a perspective that only you have. And maybe that perspective is something that only you have because your camera that you're shooting with has a defect that no other camera has. And so embrace the defects. We could talk for an hour about why I think we need more defects in our photography and in our storytelling. Because everything that's pure is boring. Who wants boring? Show me something that's scrape it up,
It's a funny thing. You sort of you create something on a camera that is pristine, like a high resolution, super clean digital image. Then you go into a software to reintroduce all of
it up
afterwards, and it's like you reintroduce film grain, then you reintroduce light leaks, then you reintroduce, and you go, well, I mean, what? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, and even with retouching, so I think there's a time and a place to remove all the blemishes and everything on a person. If you're going to be in a magazine cover on Vogue for, a Revlon campaign or something, okay. But I think that the beauty of people is that they have a unique look. They have beauty marks, they have wrinkles, they have scars, they have texture to their skin, they have all that kind of stuff. Most of my images that I create, unless I'm doing it to demonstrate how to remove all that stuff, I leave in those defects because I think that's what makes a person, So yeah, don't be as perfect. Be a little bit rough. And I think your stories will be better.
Exactly. And it's always down to intent.
This lens that I'm shooting through right now is 21 years old. Yeah. So it's an old 85 millimeter Canon that I've adapted and put on an R5. But I love the look of this lens and this bokeh. Yeah. So I'm sure I could get a very similar look, probably a better look with a new 85, 1.2 that's going to cost $3,000. Or just buy one of these 21-year-old lenses for $800 or $500, and this is what you get.
Yeah, exactly.
Works just fine.
Always, yeah, and the thing to remember is always that there's sort of I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically you sort of plot there's sort of a curve. You for the amount of money that you would spend additionally on a lens, on a current lens, take a 24-70, for example, an 85 millimeter or something. The amount of real benefit that you get from that does in no way reflect the extra money you pay for that, if that makes sense. I shoot everything on a 24-70, a lot of things on a 24-70. That's the lens that's filming me right now. I use it for a lot of commercial work. And it's the bread and butter, the money maker lens, basically. It's on my camera virtually almost all the time, except for when I'm doing headshots. But everything else is pretty much shot on that lens.
24-70. I have one in my camera bag, and I just broke it in half. So the old one has a I repaired it about 5 times, and I think now it's finally done.
Yeah, I mean, the lens I'm using is old. It's 3 generations old, I think, in terms of 3 generations old in terms of generations of lenses where Nikon is now. It still works perfectly fine. If I shot a lot more video with it, would a modern lens be faster in terms of autofocus? Yes, it would be, blah, 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 all the rest of that. For sure. At the moment, none of that matters to me. So therefore, there's no point in me investing that amount of money.
I think if the way I've always justified spending more money, so, everything I spend money on is an investment, and it has to return. And I've got to get a return on that investment. So in the early days when I was shooting, 20 plus years ago, 30 years ago, I was using speedlights and umbrellas. And then I started shooting catalog work. And catalog work, you're shooting, very fast. It's stuff like, here's outfit 1, front, side, back. Here's the shoes, the accessories, next model, let's go. And everything has to be, the color has to be highly accurate. And then your exposures have to be the same. And what I was finding is with my, my speed lights, and I'd borrow some strobes, the color temperature would vary and the exposure would vary. And so in the early 2000s, I invested in ProPhoto gear, which was very expensive. But the reason I did that was I knew that the clients that I wanted to get would not put up with the kind of work that I was creating. And I couldn't go through and retouch 200 or 300 images to make sure the exposures and the color was all the same when it was varying. And so when I spent that, it was a lot of money. All of a sudden, those issues vanished. So exposures were always the same, color always the same, refresh rates were really fast. And then I got higher end clients, and that gear paid for itself right away. And so from that perspective, I think, like you said, if you're going to shoot a lot of video, you're shooting F1 or something, you got to have the fastest lens available. And so it's worth spending that money. But if you're shooting a podcast where the focus doesn't really change much, it doesn't have to be that fast. So
exactly.
My criteria is there something I want to do or I need to do that I cannot do with the gear that I have right now? And if that's true, then I'll make the investment.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's exactly the thing. And I think that's just the difference very often between people who do photography professionally, for example, for a living, and people who do it as a hobby. Because one thing I notice a lot, especially in the sort of in the camera club environment, for example, is that it's really all about having the latest and the greatest gear. And people half the time can't really believe that some of the gear I use is actually really quite old. And the misconception I think often is that, well, but you're a professional, so therefore you must have the latest and the best gear. And the answer is no, I'm a professional, therefore I have to justify every penny I spend on gear, because the reality is, let's say when I shoot a headshot client, whether I do that on an 85 1.8, that doesn't cost an arm and a leg, but I create imagery that absolutely serves the purpose, and images that look great, and the client is really happy with that, and all the rest of it. That client is not going to pay me more money just so I shoot it on an 85 1.4 1.2 that costs several times that. There's no justification for me to make that extra investment. Likewise, camera bodies is a good example. Like, why should I dump the body that I'm using right now just because Nikon or Canon have just brought out the next iteration of that?
Yeah.
Well, because it doesn't, on the surface of it, it doesn't improve anything that I do already. If, like you said, if there is a need, then amazing. Great. It's worth the investment.
The new R5 Mark II that just came out from Canon, and the new R1, I think. So I looked at the all the specs, the video reviews and everything. And for me, like, there is nothing that those new cameras have that I need. So it was directly focused on sport shooters, photojournalists, and video. And, so like the overheating problem, if I was shooting video out in a hot environment a lot, I probably would upgrade, because, now the new R5 Mark II has some cooling properties that the R5 doesn't have. I don't ever have, my camera never overheats because I don't use it for that. It just doesn't make any sense for me. So I know that I'm going to be making videos for the next couple of years, and people are going to be like, why do you have a camera that's a generation too old? And my response will be, send me $3,500 and I'll gladly upgrade my camera. But there's no reason for that to happen.
Yeah, exactly. I'm in exactly the same boat in that respect. It's I do actually. Relatively speaking, I do shoot a lot of video. Obviously, I shoot the podcast. I make content for Platypod, for example, who support the show. I can do all of that with the gear that I already own. So there is literally no need for me to spend more money. If there was so Nikon have, with the Z6 III, for example, Nikon have really invested into the video specs. There are some neat improvements. At the moment, I don't really see how it's going to make any difference to what I'm doing specifically. So therefore, it's not really worth.
Right. If the new Canon stuff, no global shutter, that was a big disappointment. There wasn't anything that said, hey, I need this. So my R5, by the way, I had it on the motorcycle. I had my Leica M10, and I started with a Leica M9, and I upgraded to the M10, which was very expensive. And I sold my old M240, not the M9, M240, but it was still probably a $4,000 after selling and upgrading difference. But the reason I did that was the difference between the M240 and the M10, as far as the ISO noise, was incredible, huge difference. And so a lot of the shots that I wanted to take with my M240, I couldn't do, and now I can. And so that was a huge jump. I was in South Africa, and I was shooting for Cosmopolitan magazine. I was shooting a day in the life of this designer. So she called me and said, hey, can you follow me for a day? And, we're going to shoot all this stuff. Then it's going to be on the Cosmo South Africa's Instagram page, a takeover. And I'm like, sure, that'd be fantastic. Let's do it. She wanted really shallow depth of field. She liked that look. But what I didn't think was I only have my Leica. And so the number of shots that I missed, because she wanted to be walking and, doing runway kind of stuff and posing, I was missing probably 70% of the shots because they were just falling out of focus, because it's always manual focus as a rangefinder. And we had to work so slow that if I was going to do that every day, I would definitely get an R5 or even the R5 Mark II now. So the reason I got the R5 was Creative Live asked me to come back and teach a series of classes. And I knew I couldn't do that with a Leica. I couldn't do studio lighting with a Leica, even though you can, but most people aren't, they're not going to say, why are you shooting that with a Leica? Use something else. And I was going to buy a 5D Mark III or 4. Yeah. And so I ended up like, okay, DSLR or mirrorless. I did not want to go get a mirrorless camera because I just didn't like them. All the experiences I had with them, there was a delay in the viewfinder. I like the optical, be able to see. But I realized like that's where the future was. Anybody that watches this stuff, they're going to have a mirrorless camera. I need to get on board. I need to join the future. So I bought the R5, and immediately I realized it's probably the best camera I've ever owned. It's mind-blowingly good. And yeah, I haven't looked back, but there has to be some really significant reason for me to make a jump of that significance. And right now I don't see anything that's justifies going from R5 to a Mark II.
Yeah. So that's the thing, everybody's throwing these, marketing slogans at you when you're watching YouTube or you're reading stuff online or you're reading blogs or whatever. It's difficult a lot of the time to dodge all of these attempts of, X, Y, and Z trying to sell you their gear all of the time. But when you're doing it as a job, where you're generating income in order to live rather than in order to reinvest it into your business constantly, then it does take a lot of sort of staying power to actually, to dodge all these attempts of like being sold gear all the time.
Yeah, it's very true. I saw a couple of photographers that were sponsored by Canon flew to Phoenix. I don't want to name names, but you'll know who they are. And they shot the new Canon R5 Mark II and the new R1. They shot, I think it was the women's championships, WNBA. I'm not sure what it was. Anyway, they shot a bunch of stuff. They made some videos talking about how great the cameras were, and we're very thankful that Canon flew them out. And then one of them on their channel made a follow-up video and said, hey, now that I've had a chance to sort of process all this stuff, this is a fantastic camera, but I'm not going to upgrade for the reasons that we've already discussed. And I thought it was interesting that he came back and was like, hey, if you're a photojournalist, if you're a sports shooter, if you're shooting 8K, RAW, that kind of stuff, this makes sense. But for wedding photographers, for, studio photographers, it just doesn't make sense for me. And I really respected him for coming back and being like, hey, let's sort of clarify what I was saying there.
Yeah, that's quite an important attitude to have in order to actually remain genuine to your audience as well. And that's the other thing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's it becomes what's the word?
Disingenuous, fake.
Disingenuous. Yeah, fake. Yeah, exactly. That's it. So that's the thing. I want to talk about your YouTube channel. Your Mark Wallace YouTube channel, because you mentioned it earlier. You started putting out some new tutorial videos, which I've seen and I've
this right here.
enjoyed. Let me just switch that. There you go.
Yeah. So this is the channel. It's I'll pop myself in down here. Yeah. So this is the channel that's been around since 2006, I think. It has every single video that I made for the first 2 years of Adorama TV, all those digital photography one-on-one videos. All of them are still there. They're still fantastic. You should go back and watch all those videos because it still walks through the entire process. If you just watch those, you would come out of that having gone to a photography school. But I'll go back to this. So what I'm doing now is going back and doing exploring photography. So all the same stuff that I was doing on Adorama TV, I'm now doing on my old channel. And also I've got these live events that I'm producing. And so we just did one for Evoto. There's more coming out. And so the educational stuff that's on the channel, I'm creating content as much as I possibly can. I was trying to do 2 videos per week, and I was killing me. because to film and edit and post and film and edit and post all by myself, that was a challenge in and of itself. But the costs of doing that is just insane. And so I am now in Colombia here, so I can create content at a much, much lower price. And so that makes it more affordable, so I can create. And the more I create, the more people that subscribe, the more people that view, the more watch hours, the more revenue. And then, it takes a few years for things to sort of balance out where you're actually breaking even. But there are some sponsors and some partners that I've had over time that are asking me to create content for them. So that's all coming. And then this place I'm right now is this little apartment that I have rented here, and it has a fiber connection. And so I plan to do live tutorials from here. And so most of them will be things like Lightroom and Photoshop, but we're also going to be looking at how to do things like environmental portraits, balancing a speed light with an ambient light. How do you shoot, which lens should I buy? All that kind of stuff. And so we're going to do that here. And also there's a studio down the road that I can rent, and we're going to be doing some stuff there. So hopefully a lot more live stuff is on the horizon. It really depends on how the next month or two goes. If we have a lot of involvement, if we have a lot of people that are engaged, and we see those watch hours go up where we're able to pay the expenses, then we'll just keep on going. And if it looks like there's a lot of people that are watching and we can't pay the expenses, well, we can't pay the expenses. And so that's just the economics of how that stuff goes.
So are you planning on staying in Colombia for a while, or are you
a little while
with yours?
Yeah. So ideally I'd like to be back in Phoenix and have a studio there full time and set up everything. And, we've got a 4K broadcast system there that I put together to create all the creative live content. But the only way for that to happen is I've got to be able to earn enough to save. The way in the United States that you get even a rental house, you have to pay the first and last, and then generally, because there's a waiting list, you have to pay an additional month or two, and then you have to prove that you have triple the amount that the place costs. So just for me to come back and walk into a house that I could actually use as a studio and a living space, I'd probably have to have $15,000 or $20,000 ready to spend, like in the first month. So it's really difficult. And because I've been out of the United States for so long, I haven't had a residence. So all the things like power, phone hookup, internet service, all that kind of stuff, generally they look and say, oh yeah, you had this at your last house, you were good at those bills, so we're just going to hook it up. But if you haven't been in the country for a while, they're like, we don't know who you are. So you have to pay us $1,000 deposit or $300 deposit, and you add that for gas and electric and Wi-Fi and, all that stuff. It's just really expensive. And so fortunately in Colombia, things are not as expensive. So hopefully I can create enough content and build some revenue, put that in the bank, return to the United States, rent a place, and then continue there. And then I'd love to return to teaching in person, but all of that takes revenue that I just don't have right now. So if you're a viewer of my channel, turn on the bell, super chat, super thanks, memberships are coming, all of that stuff. And it seems like guys like me and others on YouTube are just sort of gouging people, give me your money. It feels like that kind of thing. But most of us are just trying to pay the bills. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly how it goes. And again, it's people don't obviously when we've covered this a little while ago, but people don't really realize what the what the costs are of actually putting something like this together. The fact that there are subscriptions that have to be paid. There's a whole lot of actual money that as a creator you have to actually pay out first of all, in order to put this whole thing together. In terms of podcasting, it's the
there's this. I don't know how but maybe because I rode around the world on a motorcycle and I have a Leica camera, but there's this perception online that I'm rich, and there's nothing farther from the truth. In fact, I didn't. I was trying to not come down to Colombia. I was trying to make it work in the United States, and I was for the first couple months that I rebooted my channel. I was living in my tent, off solar panel, in a free campground on the Mogollon Rim in Arizona. And really, the only reason I left is it got too hot. I couldn't stay there. And so I don't know who out there would live in a tent for 2 months just so they could go to work. But that's the kind of commitment that I'm bringing to try to create a channel and revive this and build a community. And so hopefully it works out, because I've loved doing it in the past. I've loved doing it. I love doing it with Creative Live and Adorama TV and all the F-Stopper stuff. I think there's a future that makes it work, but it's really been a rough 2 years since the world changed, after COVID, and revenue from advertising dollars, all that stuff is everything has changed. I don't know if that's the same with your experience, but almost every creator that I know that's been doing this for a while tells the same story of it's the dollars that companies can invest have evaporated.
I mean, for me, it was the pandemic wiped out my entire living. I mean, I used to shoot conferences, international conferences before, and that's, I specialize in that. And of course, when the first lockdown arrived, it was game over for that, because nobody, like any conference in the world was canceled at that point. So, because lots of countries went into lockdown, flights were grounded, borders were shut, the risks were way too high. With some of my international clients, my corporate clients, for example, they would have sales conferences in wherever, and then they would fly in the sales teams from all over the world, everywhere from Israel to North America to Asia to Australia, Europe, whatever. And everybody would come together for these 3 or 4 days for this sales conference, And of course, from my perspective, it was perfect. Or from the company's perspective, it was perfect because everybody was there, so we could do headshots en masse, cover the whole thing, and it would work with the video team and all the rest of it. So you cover the whole conference and create lots of imagery, for all sorts of different purposes. It's really, it's great. But when the pandemic hit, all of that went away, like literally within a day, and it was one of these very sudden realizations that, from my perspective, I realized, I made the cardinal, the rookie mistake basically, and built my entire business on just one pillar. I was like, shit. And of course, if anybody, like 10 years ago, if anybody said to me like, oh yeah, there'll be a global pandemic and it'll wipe out your business completely, I'll be like, yeah, right, whatever. But it happened, and so the thing was, at that time it was like, okay, I think, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to watch some Netflix for a bit.
I can just do that.
Just do that. And then, I watched we did the Marvel movie marathon, which I did twice, once with the kids and once with my wife, who's a sci-fi freak. So we did that. And, after that, it was probably, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks into the pandemic, and I was like, screw this. Like, I have to do something. Like, I cannot just, commiserate all day and stare at a screen all day. I just can't, I have to do something creative. And I'm sorry. And if if my previous business model doesn't work, then I'm going to have to figure something else out. But in the meantime, I need to do something creative that will help me structure my week, so where I don't wake up in the morning and go, oh, I don't know what day it is, and I actually don't care because every day is the same. I needed to do something that would, first of all, give me some structure. That was kind of like my way back into normal life. And thus, when at the time, I was talking to my friend Nick, and just like playing with this idea of starting a podcast. I mean, we chatted about it before, maybe 6 months before that, and it was like one of these ideas, like, oh, hey man, do you know what would be cool? Starting a podcast would be cool. all right, yeah, then you forget all about it, right? And life goes on.
Right.
You kick that can down the way, and just like a million other ideas, it's just one of those ideas that's just, you just forget about. But in that situation, at the beginning of the pandemic, like in full-on lockdown, we over here in the UK had like some of the most drastic lockdowns in the world. There was a point where we were, for months and months and months, we were only allowed to leave the house for 45 minutes a day for personal exercise. And then you were literally locked in your house, and that was it, And so,
Right.
And I was talking to Nick every day, on FaceTime and whatnot, and we were talking about, he was a videographer, so we were talking about cameras and lenses and this and that, nerdy stuff. And so I said, like, hey, do you remember this idea of, this podcast idea? Now's the time to do it because I'm not doing anything else. And so I remember it was a Friday afternoon, and, so we started talking about it. And as always, it's really easy to talk yourself out of a good idea. Is really easy once you come up against some obstacles, because you're like, oh yeah, podcasting, how does it even work? Like, where do podcasts live, right? How does this
how do I get how do I connect with people?
Yeah, how do I get this on? How do you get your podcast onto something like Apple Podcasts, or like how does this actually work? How does any of it work? And then how long should it be? What should we talk about? What should we call it? Do we need a theme tune? No problem. All of these sort of things. And then, before you know it, you get to the point where you go like, this is just too hard. It's just too difficult. Let's think of something else.
Too much.
But I remember saying to Nick, like, look, man, what are you doing on Monday? This is on a Friday afternoon. I said to him, like, what are you doing on Monday at 4:00? And he goes, well, nothing. I'm stuck in the house, so I'm not doing anything. I can't go anywhere. So, well, whatever, nothing. And I said, like, well, because Monday 4 p.m. is when we're going to hit record for the first episode. And we're just going to have to figure it out between now and then. Okay, and we're going to call the first episode Done is Better Than Perfect, because it is absolutely going to be terrible.
Right.
100% is going to be terrible. And the episode after that is going to be terrible. And if we make it to episode 10, that's still probably going to be pretty bad. But most likely it's going to be much better than episode 1. And
Sure.
if we make it to episode 20, by that time we would have probably learned a couple of things, and it'll just get easier. We just have to learn as we go. And this is really the only way we're gonna do it. And that's exactly what we did. Now it's whatever, there's 217 episodes later. Now I know a little bit about podcasting, and of course the way this podcast is made now is very different from the way it was made in the beginning, and blah blah blah. But but ultimately, it's if you don't get started, you're never actually going to get anywhere. That's the
Never going to get anywhere. Just got to do it.
Mark, thank you so much for being on the show today. It was an absolute pleasure having you on the show again. So thank you so much for being the guest on this week's.
Thank you for having me. And we should do it again before 2 years passes, or 3, or however many it was.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, folks, that's it for today. It was awesome having Mark on the show. And as always, before we go, let me just recommend another episode that I think you'll like. Check out episode 215 with Gavin Hoey. I'm sure you love it. If you enjoy our content, consider supporting us on buymeacoffee.com/CameraShake to help us continue creating and bringing you more exciting episodes. It really does mean the world to us. And for those of you who are listening to the audio version of this podcast, did you know that there's a fully fledged video version over on YouTube with plenty of examples of our guest photography in full Technicolor? Well, you should know by now because I harp on about it all the time. So all you have to do is go over to YouTube, search for Camera Shake Podcast, and you'll be able to watch all past episodes on there. And if you're already on YouTube, drop us a comment, hit the like button, ring the bell, and share with your friends. Your engagement helps us reach a wider audience all over the world. Thank you for listening and watching. And remember, a new episode drops every Thursday, so make sure you mark that in your calendars. Until next time, keep shaking things up in the world of photography. See you next Thursday.